Snow fell in gentle spirals over the city like 1,000 tiny secrets waiting to be discovered, but Victoria Hale, 32, self-made CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country, had no patience for magic, mystery, or the sentimental softness of December. She had built her empire on logic, calculated steps, and an ironclad calendar with no room for the unpredictable nonsense people like to call romance. For 3 years her friends had begged her to try blind dating, insisting she needed balance in her life, which to Victoria sounded only slightly less irritating than someone telling her to smile more. Love was chaotic, emotional, unstructured, and she had no time for anything she couldn't control. That was the truth she told herself every year as Christmas approached and the world around her glowed with fairy lights and hopeful hearts. But this year was different, because somehow she found herself sitting in a penthouse lounge with her closest friends, losing a dare she should have never agreed to, and that dare was what placed her on a snow-glazed road hours later, walking toward a wooden cabin door she had no intention of knocking on. The dare was simple: one blind date before Christmas Eve. One date with a man she'd never met, never researched, never vetted. A man whose name her friends refused to tell her until she promised, on video, for proof, that she would actually show up. "Victoria, you're brilliant, but you're emotionally dehydrated," her best friend Mia had laughed, sliding a note card into her hand. "For once in your life, go meet someone without Googling him first. Trust the unknown. It won't kill you." But Victoria had Googled the unknown her whole life, and it had kept her alive, successful, and respected. Still, maybe it was the champagne, or maybe the hollow silence waiting for her each night in her enormous penthouse, or maybe the quiet memory of her parents' warm Christmas traditions she pretended not to care about, but something inside her cracked just enough for her to say yes. And now here she was, boots sinking into fluffy snow, breath fogging in the cold, trying not to curse herself as she approached a cozy cabin glowing with amber light. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, clutching the folded note in her pocket. "Blind dates are for people who believe in fate, and I absolutely do not." She raised her hand to knock, before stopping, frozen not by hesitation but by the sound of faint laughter coming from inside. A child's laughter. She blinked. Her friends had told her the man lived alone. Was she at the wrong place? She stepped closer, peeking through the frosted window, and then her breath stalled. Inside, sitting on a rug near the fireplace, was a little girl with tiny blonde pigtails, wearing a pink sweater and mismatched socks, giggling as she shook a snow globe in her small hands. Behind her, a Christmas tree shimmered with lights and ornaments, and stockings decorated the mantel next to a roaring fire. The sight was warm, wholesome, something straight out of the childhood Victoria once had but never let herself long for any more. And then she saw him. The door opened with a soft creak, and there he stood, the man she was dared to meet, Evan Carter. He wasn't at all what she expected. Not the stiff, suit-wearing executive type her friends usually tried to set her up with. Instead, he was dressed in a light denim shirt with short sleeves despite the cold, his arms strong, his posture relaxed, his expression soft with surprise as he looked at her as if he'd been expecting someone entirely different yet somehow still knew she belonged here. Snow dotted his hair and shoulders, and when he leaned one arm against the doorframe, it was with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "You must be Victoria," he said gently, his voice warm in a way that felt like stepping into a blanket. "I wasn't sure you'd come." She should have corrected him. Should have told him she was only here because she'd lost a dare. Should have walked away the moment she saw a child inside, because this was far more complicated than she agreed to. But something about his eyes, soft, steady, impossibly sincere, made her stay. "I almost didn't," she admitted, brushing snow from her coat. "I don't really do blind dates." "Neither do I," he smiled, stepping aside. "But here we are. And don't worry about Lily," he added quickly, noticing her glance toward the girl. "My niece. She's staying with me just for the holidays. Her mom, my sister, works night shifts at the hospital." Victoria felt her chest loosen a fraction. He wasn't lying, she could hear the truth in his voice. She stepped inside, warmth wrapping around her instantly as the smell of pine and cinnamon filled the cabin. Lily looked up from her spot on the rug, her eyes widening with curiosity. "Hi," she said with the unfiltered boldness only children possessed. "Are you Uncle Evan's Christmas friend?" Victoria choked on a laugh. "Something like that." Evan rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. Ignore her. She's been teasing me all evening. I wasn't teasing. Lily protested. I said Christmas is magic and you need friends too. Victoria's heart twitched, just a little, but enough for her to feel it. They moved to the small living room, and she watched as Evan knelt beside Lily, tying her slipper and tucking a blanket around her legs with a tenderness that didn't fit the image of the rugged, broad-shouldered man who'd opened the door. It was clear he adored the child, and even clearer that she felt safe with him. For reasons she didn't understand, that sight made her throat tight. So, Evan said as they sat near the fireplace, your friends tricked you into this too. She raised a brow. Too? What did they do to you? They told me you were intimidating, he laughed. And they said if I survived meeting you, they'd buy me dinner. She almost smiled, almost. Intimidating. That sounds exaggerated. Evan gave her a look that was teasing but not mocking. Victoria, you're a CEO with a reputation for firing people before your morning coffee. She blinked. They tell you everything, huh? Not everything, he said with an amused glint, but enough for me to know you're impressive. And maybe a little terrifying. She fought the urge to smile again. No one spoke to her like this. Honestly. Fearlessly. Humanly. They talked for nearly an hour, but it didn't feel like talking, it felt like falling into a warm rhythm she didn't know she was missing. Evan wasn't trying to impress her or flirt in the predictable way she'd grown used to. He asked real questions. Listened. Answered sincerely. And when he laughed, it reached his eyes. Lily eventually fell asleep near the fireplace, curled like a kitten beside her blanket, the glow of the Christmas tree casting soft colors across her face. The peacefulness of the cabin began sinking under Victoria's skin, and before she realized it, she was telling Evan things she rarely admitted out loud, about how she grew up in a loving home but lost her parents early, about how she drowned herself in work to avoid the ache of memories, about how Christmas had once been her favorite season but now felt like a reminder of things she no longer allowed herself to feel. Evan didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He simply listened, and when she finally paused, he spoke with quiet kindness. You know, you don't have to keep being strong every second of your life. Tears pricked unexpectedly behind her eyes. I don't know how to be anything else. Then maybe it's time someone helped you remember. The words hit her in a place she'd boarded shut long ago, and the silence between them warmed instead of chilled. She wasn't sure when it happened or how, but suddenly she wasn't cold anymore. She wasn't guarded. She wasn't the CEO who needed to control every outcome. She was just Victoria. And Evan was just a man who saw her, not her power, not her reputation, not her armor, but her. The night stretched on, and as the snow thickened outside the window, the cabin felt like the only place in the world that mattered. Victoria didn't know what this was, or where it would lead, or if she was ready for something as uncertain as love. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity: she was glad she accepted the dare. And she had a feeling this Christmas was going to change everything. If you enjoyed this chapter and want more powerful emotional stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support encourages us to bring even more heart-touching stories your way.